I just started listing from the beginning of my career all the pests and the beneficials that I worked with. So some of these are going to be more historical, like, I started working with alfalfa weevil, you know what I mean? So I got Bathoplectes curculeonus and Bathoplectes anurus and Micropletes aethiopoides. But what that has to do with this thing, not very much, except we were learning about the insects and how to use them. I first worked with really excellent soil arthropod professor named Armin Keister. And I started doing corn insect scouting with him, and he had a class called Bionomics, so he brought in some interesting professors that were at this biocontrol lab in Columbia. So they weren't part of the university, they were USDA, and they were about a mile off campus. I got hired by this guy, his name was Ben Putler, and they named this egg parasite after him called Edovum putleri, which he found in South America that attacks Colorado potato beetle. And then the other one that I'm going to throw in here is Hippodamia convergens, and that's because back in about 1995 or 96, when I really realized that Patrick was onto stuff about ladybugs and farmscaping, where he told me he was controlling Colorado potato beetles using ladybugs. So of course all I could think of was a ladybug trying to eat a big old hard shell Colorado potato beetle, and I'm like, well, I'm going to come. It was the day before Hurricane Fran. I drove out here and came down, and Patrick had this potato patch, and it was red with ladybugs. There were so many ladybugs in there. We weren't finding Colorado potato beetle eggs, and you'd see them eating the small larvae. So suddenly, here's this, Mr. PhD began to throw away those stiff, you know what I mean? This doesn't work, that doesn't work. Well, maybe, maybe not. So we reared this one and field released it. It turned out he pulled it out of a rainforest jungle, and it was on a sister species to Colorado potato beetle, and there are these big solanaceous trees. So it didn't really like potatoes very much, but I would imagine if you took the time to really grow this thing for several generations and then train it into a potato ecosystem, what happened is we could get a lot of these wasps once the potatoes had leaves on them. But when you're starting out with Colorado potato beetle and these potatoes are busting out of the ground and they got eggs on them, those wasps came off solanaceous trees. They're just like, I'm not getting that close to the dirt. But as soon as these things were up and they had eggs in them, that thing would get going. So this is just a couple examples there. Most of this stuff is stuff that I have either reared, and it might be more just for reference material for you guys. So this is all stuff that I've done in the lab. This Euplectrus wasp attacks armyworms and other things. And so I reared it in the lab too. One of the things we found with this was when this thing stung any of the armyworms, they would never molt again. So somebody was able to take that material, and I think they've now patented this, and it may become a biologically based pesticide. I throw green lacewings in on cabbage looper and imported cabbage worm and stuff just because we used to use, that's stuff that I bought. The thing with this is, and I want to show you this because this is where we can start to get into things that make differences, okay? So you can buy several different kinds of lacewings. You can buy live lacewing larvae. You can buy them in something like this. I never opened this one up because when it came in, it was already at 105. So I have a motto: 5 minutes at 105 and your lacewings ain't alive, all right? So this is on Rice Bran, where they would grow these things with something like Indian meal moth larvae or something, but there would be 1,000 lacewing larvae in this, and you would sprinkle it out. So if they're alive, it works great, but when they come and they're dead, they make a good, example. So I don't know if you guys if you've seen that, you can just put it back on the table. So the other thing that we started to do, if we couldn't get them like that, this was actually more expensive, but you would get these frames. And these frames have organdy cloth on them on both sides and a little bit of wax, and what they would do is they would put lacewing eggs and moth eggs in here and just seal it shut, and then each cell would battle it out to where there would just be one lacewing. So by the time you get it, they'd come and they'd be pretty good size. You know, they'd be a moderately sized lace. And let me tell you, these things work great because what you would do then is you just peel back the corner and start sprinkling these things out. These would eat oleander aphids, they'd eat allium aphids, they'd eat all the stuff that these other ones.
Nasturtium aphids.
Nasturtium aphids, right.
Nobody else wants.
Right. So, you know, these ladybug larvae would come up to these aphids and the aphids would kick them in the head, you know, and the ladybug larvae would go away. So then especially on oleander aphids, I had this one woman who said, nothing's going to eat these oleander aphids. I said, watch this. So I go in there and sprinkle these things out. And oleander aphids are big yellow aphids on oleander. She had this oleander plant in her house in Blowing Rock. Watch this come up, go boom, lift this big oleander aphid up. And she's going, oh my God, you know. So.
Lacewing larvae are really the only thing that I can get to work on certain really recalcitrant pests, like the allium aphid.
These become, you know, really, really good, tough things. This is the great proletariat insect that if you were an entomology student, there's a couple other parasites. So all of us that went through, you know, IPM training in the late 70s and early in the 80s, we all worked on alfalfa weevil because this was a very successful program. What happens with a lot of these successful programs, there used to be two branches of the USDA. One was ARS, which was the research end where I was doing the research stuff. The other branch was Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, and they were the operational end. So if ARS discovered that Bathoplectus cuculianus or one of these other ones were really good, they'd hand it off to APHIS, and then APHIS would do the redistribution work. So the ARS guys mainly stayed in the lab, and the APHIS guys were all the field guys and were the beer drinkers and were all the fun, you know. So I started hanging out a little bit more with the APHIS guys, but the ARS guys did all the work, okay? So then what happened when 9/11 happened, they split. APHIS became part of Department of Homeland Security. So they do biosecurity. And the USDA still has its ARS side, but those two are now separate. So it's much harder to get these guys. The people that discover stuff now are not the same people that implement it, you know what I mean? And trying to connect those two, there's a big opportunity for us private people to come in because there's this gap between the two that sometimes we can fill, okay? So another one, this is one I did my PhD on. You saw the cocoons earlier on the broccoli plants. They were Coatzia cocoons. They were mostly glomerata. This is another wasp that attacks imported cabbage worm, and it's from Europe. We released it, never got it established. This is a great pupal parasite, Pteromalus puparum, and it works really good. So it attacks the pupae of the imported cabbage worm. You've got green lacewings, and then of course your ladybugs. I did field releases and stuff on this in the 90s, and we kind of got that fairly well worked out. And you guys know imported cabbage worm is one of our least concerned pests. But, you know, in the past, that was a really big problem because we didn't have we weren't farmscaped. You know, we were doing the thing where you saw the thing earlier where we just had these bare fields with broccoli in them, and it was just nothing but pests. There was no room for beneficials.
Can you get most of these from the big two labs?
Yes, some of them, most of them. This guy, you can't. You used to be able to get this wasp for $1 a piece from Tom Bellows in California. We got ash whitefly in Raleigh, and within 6 months I had gotten this thing. They cost $1 a piece, so I put in for a purchase order, and we bought, I can't remember, like 1,500 of them, and put them out. You never heard of ash whitefly ever becoming a problem in Raleigh because I think we got the pest in soon enough. So this thing's really, it'll get on Bradford pears and pomegranate, but we brought the Incarcia in, so I just never, you know, in Southern California, that thing just caused hideous problems. It was honeydew coming off the plants onto cars on the road and all that.
People wanted to cut trees down because of that.
Yeah.
You know?
Does it kill the Bradford Pear?
It will.
Oh, can we import it?
We need to because Bradford Pear is now a weed tree in Missouri.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually gone wild because it's sterile, but it actually cross-pollinates, cross-fertilizes, and then it's a little, you find
See them all over the place, yeah.
Yep. And they actually start to grow thorns, and it's
Yeah.
like
Right.
a zombie tree.
Yep.
Progeny are out everywhere.
This is like triploid carp, right? They don't read the book, man. Or silver carp in Missouri River. Wear a football helmet because they come out of the water and hit you in the head. This program is all done and over with, but this is Musk Thistle. It was a tremendous problem back in the Midwest, where I grew up in Missouri. Missouri was home of, St. Louis had Dow Chemical. Dow Chemical loved Tordon. Tordon is a heterocyclic herbicide and very restricted use. Yeah, it's really bad stuff. It's a salt. These guys would put it on stumps where the cattle were. The cattle thought it was salt. They'd go over and lick it. I'd come out in the field and there'd be dead cattle by these stumps, and I'm having to call a guy up. Your Tordon's killed your cattle out here. So we were using these guys because the other thing is where we were doing this in Missouri, the Ozark Aquifer has about that much organic matter on it, and then it's limestone. So these chemicals would just go right, oh yeah, they just percolate down through the limestone and end up in the drinking water.
That one is so bad that we don't use it, but if you put it on a stump, actually, if there's any kind of root graft, it's so mobile that literally like within a radius of that, you can get basically translocations.
Right.
We don't use it at all.
Yeah, it was wicked stuff. So we were working with weevils in the same area where these guys were also doing Tordon, and they were doing rope wick applications and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm kind of like, man, I'm glad I'm not part of that. So anyway, that was a really good program. There's really good guide sheets on this. Cereal leaf beetle program is a program that we ran for the North Carolina Department of Ag. So there's these larval parasites. We had field insectaries in Salisbury. We would go out and we would grow winter wheat and go out and you would clip. The cereal leaf beetle larvae are kind of like asparagus beetles where they're gooey. So you could go out and they'd be attacked by these, and what we would do is we'd just clip big amounts of rye or wheat and put them in 5-gallon buckets and give them to these guys, and then they'd take them to their wheat fields and just set these things out, and the larvae would crawl off, and then you'd get the parasite going. Another one we did early on was Euonymus Scale, and these are two beneficial insects. They're native. They're now native. This one both of these came from Korea, and they work on all of the hard scales. So they work on white peach scale. They work on elongate hemlock scale. They work on Euonymus scale. So this is a good one to have out here. When I beat hemlocks a lot of times, you'll get a lot of these Chilocaris, they're solid black beetles with a red spot on either wing. There's a native one called Chilocaris stigma, and then there's this introduced one called Chilocaris quani, and there's some funky way you tell them apart, but if they're there, those are good scale predators. Most of the work, and you guys already have seen this, is we've done most of our work with Laricobius nigrinus. There's a Japanese Laricobius called Osakensis. The native pine bark adelgid predator is Rubitus. These two can interbreed, so they're actually biotypes of each other. I go to meetings, and you can get these gene jockey guys to argue for about 5 hours. I'll go in there and I'll go, what's a species? And then, because back in the day what it was is if two individuals could come together and mate and make a viable offspring, that was a species. Well, now they like to tease this apart where now they're looking at distance. You know what I mean? If it's more than 2%, then it's probably a species or they're trying to evolve. These two will become one. The other thing that happened when we put nigrinus out, these two have the same scent trails. So nigrinus would attract Rubitus over to the hemlock. So it would be like the first time back in my little hometown of Warsaw where a guy comes up to me and goes, did you ever eat at that Peking Chinese? Have you eaten Chinese food before? It's really good, the first time these people, so all of a sudden, Rubitus woke up and said, hey, not only am I in pines, but I can go to hemlocks. So it actually helped the whole system. Another one really quickly and so these are available, and that should have an E on the end, Sasagi Skimnus Sugi. Skimnus is not available. These are all ones that I worked with the feds. These are Chinese beetles. If they ever show up, then we can use them. I've been looking for them. This is a time of year when they start to show up, and the other place I'm going to tell you where these guys are, they're going to be over by Hawksbill, or they're going to be up on these real rough ridges because these are Xeric predators. You got two different habitats for hemlocks. One habitat is that wet, lush cove, out here, this lower thing. The other one,
Understories, by stream.
exactly. The other one, and this is mainly Carolinas, but Easterns too, because you can go top of Hawksbill and you got both of them sitting side by side and they're windblown and beat the crap, but they're up there. You have these Carolinas. In that environment, when you go up to Hawksbill and the wind's blowing 90 miles an hour up there, there's no needle duff. So the only insects that can survive are these insects here that stay in the tree. You're not going to find Rubidus and Nigrinus in any appreciable numbers up there unless they have flown up there, because there's no way for them to reproduce. When those larvae drop out, they're just dropping on a rock like this and it cooks them and they're gone. All right? So the next thing that we worked with a lot are aphids. I forgot to put Aphidoletes in here. Aphidoletes aphidomyza. There's these funguses that may be out there. Harmonia is naturally occurring. We would buy minute pirate bugs. You can buy convergent lady beetles. I've bought praying manids. I used to think praying manids were worthless, but I'm going to tell you, when praying manids are little, they eat all the little stuff. So I could have praying manids on a particular plant that had a lot of aphids, and they would clean it up.
And then they'll eat each other.
And then they eat each other, right, exactly. So they're just like humans, they're just nasty, nasty, nasty. Corn earworm, the same thing where we were at Central Carolina Community College, and then you've got your different trichogramma species. You got nubilala and all those. We established that one at Central Carolina Community College. And I think, oh my gosh, there is more. Boy, I've been busy. I forgot about that. I thought it could have been it. When I first came up to Boone, I worked with Wilcox Natural Products, which was the old herb company that had been there for almost 100 years. They went public in 2000. They even had all their 100th birthday stuff printed up, and the company just sucked them dry and collapsed them right out. But before they did that, I was working with those guys. They had Indian meal moth complex, and I've got some Indian meal moths from Herbal Ingenuity, which is the new reincarnated Wilcox natural product. You also have all your flower beetles, your red flower beetles, your confused flower beetles, and these can be pests actually in your barn. When we started working in this stuff and having people that were bringing herbs of various types into Wilcox, one of the things that happened, it's this, I call it the Indian meal moth complex, because there's Indian meal moth, almond moth, tobacco moth, Mediterranean flower moth, okay? They all look exactly alike almost, they all act exactly alike. When these guys would bring their herbs in to Wilcox, I finally got Wilcox to go, will you please quit bringing these herbs directly into the warehouse? Let's make a holding station. So we got 2 semi-trailers and put them across the street. One of them had a freeze unit on it where we could dial it down and freeze it, because what we found, these guys were all old tobacco growers. Every one of these old barns, if you went out to these old barns and you went along the sides of them, there was old tobacco leaves, 20 years old, it's just been in there. There were moths in there eating everything. So here they bring in lobelia, they might bring some catnip in or something. Well, boy, those things would just go right for that. Or, let me show you. So this comes out of Herbal Ingenuity in Wilkesboro, which is the newly reincarnated sort of Wilcox natural product. So this is Indian meal moth complex in red clover. And what they had done, they'd gotten that stuff in, and it came in boxes, and so it had the clover, and it had cardboard. So you had raisin bran. I like to call it raisin bran, because you had one source, which is the nitrogen of this, and then they could get their carbs and they'd eat the cardboard. So what we got them to do was we put a hobo temperature recorder in those boxes, draw that down to where it was down at freezing, leave it there for 6 days, we could take it out, everything's dead, then we can bring it in the warehouse. But before this, these guys, it was like a VD clinic. You go in there, there's every kind of bug in the world. I'm like, why you guys keep bringing everything directly in here and just making this big mess, okay? So anyway, we reared this little predatory beetle called Xylochris flavipes. It's another pirate bug, but this is an indoor pirate bug. And it really likes dirty, it would cruise around the edges. So we released it in there, and we were able to control the Indian meal moth complex and also these flower beetles. We had traps set up in grid patterns where we were doing micro GIS. So if we had a room like this, we'd set traps out in a grid, and you'd get this big hit, like over in the corner, right? So we knew everything was over there. One of the other things that we did, we moved all the herbs out, and we decided to do a 0 to see if we could just get a no catch. In the whole thing, once again, this one area was picking up 60 and 70 moths in a trap, and there was nothing in there. But it was against the wall. So we pulled part of the wall away, and there was a rat nest in there full of saw palmetto berries. They never would have gotten rid of this problem. So this trapping turned out to be a really good thing. So we've got traps there for that. The other one that I've been doing a lot of work with now, I'm actually transitioning back into Japanese beetle because I've been hired by Oregon and Colorado, and I'm just getting ready to get hired by California to work in cannabis. I got this phone call one day. This is Oregon Department of Agriculture. We would be interested in having you work on Japanese beetle. And of course, the very first thing I say, I'm kind of disinterested. And I go, well, what crop? And I go, cannabis. What? Yes. Okay. So next week, I'm going to Denver and pick out a place to put this wasp. Oregon is paying me to go to Colorado to put wasps out in Colorado because Oregon's smart and they want to learn this stuff. So the Colorado guys are going, Whitney Cranshaw and some of these other guys, you know, they're going, wow, I don't know about this. What are you guys doing? You know what I mean? So we're pulling everybody along again. This is a fly that attacks the adult beetle, and this is a wasp that attacks the fall grub. So you got the spring grub, you got the adult parasite, and the fall one. We got these two up in my neck of the woods, and I actually had Rob Danford, some of you might know him. He lives part of the year in New Zealand, but he comes up and he calls me up and he goes, I have no Japanese, I used to be wrapped up in Japanese beetles, and they're almost gone now. What's happened? And I said, well, I'm not going to take full credit for it, but I'm going to tell you that we purposely introduced this guy starting in 1997. We had it established by 2000. In any given year, it takes out about 70% of all female Japanese beetles, because once it lays an egg, that beetle's dead in 5 days. So your parasitization rate's additive every 5 days. Those beetles drop out. So what you do is you monitor your beetle population. The minute you get your first egg, you make that day 1, and every 5 days, you just start adding your parasitization rate. And they lay 90 to 95% of their eggs on female beetles because, you know, they're the ones with all the fat bodies and everything. So this thing's really good. This is work that I just did in Jamaica back in September. We identified a really effective parasite that they have, and we gave them this product, Spexit, which is a viral product. They tested this on onions. Jamaica has now they've just come out, when we got down there, they came out with a national onion program. Because they're important to many, you know what I mean? But beet armyworm is just eating them up, but they're not timing things right, and they're not working on an island-wide basis. You know what I mean? If you're in St. Thomas Parish way out in the east part, that's you. You don't know what happens over in the Dells. You know what I mean? But there's an outbreak of beet armyworms in the Dells, and it's just going to work its way across the island and wipe these guys out, but nobody's talking to each other. Sounds familiar? Yes, yes. Respect, man, respect. So we're working with them on that. Yeah, and this is a good one. And I go down there. They were like, you need to bring Farmscaping seeds. And I said, I'm not bringing sand to the beach. You guys are going to teach me what you already have down there. If you guys need to start thinking about on-island solutions. That's what they really love, that I would say to them, just like what we would do here. We have our own solutions right here in this room that we have worked for decades to put together. So let's go to onion maggot. We're able to easily get onion maggot under control with HB nematodes and also these SF, because those are specific to Diptera, okay? Done really good job, done this several times with having big problems with onion maggot and garlic, where we treated. Now when we would do our garlic, we make a hole and we put a pint of special compost in it and we shoot it with 18,000 nematodes per hole. We put our clove in there. No. And the other thing too was when we did our garlic, because we did that pint of, our garlic was, I mean, it's rocambole garlic, but it's big. And people got to know us. It became a production at the farmer's market. Because here's what we would do. We would never do any of it ahead of time. We would go to the market, and if somebody ordered one, our garlic was this tall. It looked like little sweet corns. And we would take it and put it on the tailgate. We have a cable cutter. Cut the root off, flip it around, cut it, and then peel it, and then hand it to these guys. $2 a pop all day long. One day I did $486 with people handing me just $2 at a time. So it worked. It worked really good. We did this at Jake's farm. Are they still going?
You know, I think they've kind of like scaled back, but I think they're still doing something.
Still doing stuff. Okay. Another one, of course, are mealy bugs in greenhouses. This is Cryptolaemus montrezori. It's a mealy bug destroyer. I've got a little vial back there that has a picture of it. Once again, if you're going to put these guys out, put them out in a greenhouse. Try to give them a little bit of farmscaping. Make them a little banker place. You know what I mean? Most of the people just flinging this stuff out, and they have a rough time.
Years ago, I was taking a soils class with Chip Hope, and it was soils, and it was like horticulture. And he's like, "You're going to teach with me, Pat." I don't know, And so one of the things he wanted to do was he wanted to do farmscaping in the Blue Ridge Community College greenhouse. And we bought, not farmscaping, they wanted to do beneficial insects. We bought all these different beneficial insects and released them all, and they didn't make it. They didn't make it at all. And Richard could tell us what was wrong immediately, called him up and said, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, Pat, your greenhouse is a jungle. Blue Ridge Community College greenhouse is a desert. Which one do you think the beneficials are going to do well in, Right. It gets hot in their greenhouse. They got nowhere to go. It gets hot in your greenhouse. Right.
Their greenhouses had concrete floors with the diamond mesh tables. And you know what I mean? Look what we just went into. You got the earth under your feet. Everything's growing in there. There's bees flying around. It's just a totally different setup. So yeah, that's part of this too that we keep going back to, and then I'm trying to tell you guys is one person doing compost tea and not doing it the right way, and another person doing it the right way makes it work.
Literally, you'll have all kinds of people say, "Oh, beneficials don't work in greenhouses," and they don't work in some greenhouses. And there's like a whole attitude towards greenhouses of nothing but the plants we're growing, not a weed anywhere. Nothing can die in this greenhouse that doesn't have to be removed.
That's how I was brought up as a corn insect scout. You had to have clean cultivation. I wanted to be, if I could shoot a rabbit a quarter mile away, you know what I mean? I didn't want nothing between me and that. At the end of the year, that was all clean. It was the worst field design you could ever have. All you did is just lay it out for disease and insects and pests and wind and everything blowing away. You made it worse on yourself. Flea beetles and crucifers, and also in your lettuce mix, like Johnny's salad mix. We used HB nematodes. It took 3 weeks. The critical thing here is your soil temperature. Your soil temperature right now with the commercially available nematodes that we have, your soil temperature's got to be above 50 degrees.
So better yet if it's above 60, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, yeah.
But below 80.
Right. There may be, and I forgot to do this on Google, but there may be some cold tolerant strains of nematodes available now, because some of these nematologists have gone up into Canada and Alaska and Minnesota, you know what I mean, and they're finding these nematodes that are working down to at least 40 degrees, 8 degrees above freezing, they're still cruising around. So that's the kind of thing we need. We saw some greenhouse whiteflies in the greenhouse. The specific one for that would be Incarcia formosa, and that's because greenhouse whiteflies, their wings are held roof-like over their head. If you get to ash whitefly or silverleaf whitefly, their wings are flat, okay? It's a really good key character just for this one. If you can see, it looks like that roof.
Richard, back to the nematodes for a second. The one that I learned from Jim Klutz, when I've been putting them out for years and I had spotty success, right? And I just did them different each time. Sometimes I put them all out and then come back and water them in. And so one time I'm putting them out in silo and my irrigation pump goes down. And it's 9 o'clock at night and I'm bone tired and I got to fix the irrigation pump in the dark. I don't want to do that. And so I call him up and say, if I put them out already but I don't water them until morning, will they be okay? And he's like, Pat, they should be fine if you get out there right away before the sun comes up. But remember this, 7 minutes of UV light and they're sterilized and useless. It's like, you could have told me that 5 years ago, because there were plenty of times that they got way more than 7 minutes, you know? So it's just important to try and always get, what I tell people is when you're buying a bug, talk to that salesperson and say, what are the pitfalls? What can I do wrong? You know? Let that salesperson be the consultant, that whether they like it or not, that's part of the deal. When you're buying from somebody, they know how to make it work, and you make them help you make sure it works. You know? It'll just make life a whole lot easier.
If you guys haven't ever ordered nematodes, here's a couple ways that they come. I don't know if they come this way anymore because they keep changing it. They've granulized them now, you know what I mean? They've made a lot of advances. But the one that we used to get, this would be a mix of HB and probably SC nematodes. So it comes on a sponge, and it looks like somebody hawked a lug on the sponge when you get it. If you've never done this, all right. So you open this thing up. Typically, we didn't use very much high-tech stuff, but we could mix these in just a regular watering can. But once again, on a day like today, I'm putting it out today. You know, not till I see the sun hitting those trees over there am I going to put them out. And I might moderately water them in. Sometimes you can do it before a rain. The best time to do it is right after a rain, if you can do it, because you never know. You know, if you're going to put it out and you get a 1/4 inch of rain, that's great. You get an inch of rain, those nematodes are down in that pond over there now, you know, because they just got washed out.
They didn't have a chance to swim down in before, you know. If you got an inch of rain over several hours, it'd be fine. It just depends on how heavy it is coming down.
So this was the old thing where they were using sponges, and then they went to these other these ones here, and these ones were granular. And I don't know how they did it, but they work good. I mean, they work. Because the other thing that I do, I've got a dissecting scope. So if I'm getting my nematodes in, one of the things I do is put a little water, get some of these and drop them on there. And if I don't see them wiggling around, I'm calling these guys up and say, these guys ain't moving.
Well, and Richard, you can basically just use a loop, right? I mean, they're not that small.
No, you could see them. You can see them wiggling around. So these ones came in these little funky cartons that you peeled open, and it was just like, it was like grape nuts. You know what I mean? It was this little granular thing, and there was 5 million in here. So we could put these out. These mainly we were using once again for flea beetle control, and a lot of it was at Jake's farm on their Johnny's salad mix, where we showed in a 3-week period we went from non-sellable, where these leaves just had tons of stuff. And in fact, I'll tell you what, we're not almost, when we get done, I might jump to the website real quick because I can show you photos of some of this stuff. So, we talked about spider mites. These are some of the mites. The thing with some of these is this one, I believe, is for the hot climate. This one is for dry, and this one is kind of in between. And then this one is another one that's also a phytocelius. Every one of these works slightly different in a different humidity or no humidity. So typically what they do when you order these now is you'll get a mix of these mites and you put them out, and it's kind of a crapshoot, but usually one of the 3 is going to work. Okay, so they put in all that stuff. A sweet potato white. Yes, yeah.
If you put them out like I did,
Right.
and it seemed like I had control, but the problem was still there, does that mean that basically they didn't, what I don't ever want to have happen, they didn't kill every last spider mite, but in this case, they didn't keep going and the spider mites did, and then they came back?
Probably so, and if you don't get them on early enough, I mean, if you're going to put them on when you've already got massive amount of webbing, you're done. You know, a lot of this stuff, here's what would happen. I would bring all my plants that were out on my porch, all these plants, and I bring them in the fall, right? By Thanksgiving, half of my plants had spider mites all over them, right? So I have to soap all those. So the next year what I did is I ordered the triplex nematodes. I brought everything in and sprinkled them all. I sprinkled them all with mites, with triple mites. I had no spider mites because they were already, you know, I put them out and if you're trying to use biologicals as a rescue treatment,
It can be a lot harder. Yeah.
that's not my job, man. That's not my job. You know, I'll talk to you on the phone and go, oh, that's really bad, you know. But, most of what we're trying to do here is that preventative health thing that we've all come to realize now is so important, is prevention as much as possible, or heading it off in the field.
I have another question about
Yes.
that. That's a big reason why I wanted to do this class was spider mites in the greenhouse.
Okay.
You know? And so we've had the same level of infestation for a long time. You say it's pretty bad. So should we basically first come in and hit them with neem, even the weeds, and then come back and release the spider mites after we've knocked them back? Release the predatory mites after we've knocked them back, rather?
I would try to release the predatory mite. Well, okay, if you're going to do neem's going to be systemic for a couple weeks, right? And that's going to be gone. So you could do that. That's cool.
That would reduce them a whole lot.
Right.
Wipe them
The
out.
other thing is to try to get these predatory mites out as early as possible before those spider mites really get going.
So do you think this is early enough?
Yeah.
Wipe
Oh,
them
yeah.
Next week?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You're actually almost behind a little bit because, I'm starting to see webbing on that
That's
vetch, and
why I
I'm
was
like,
asking,
man,
should I
get them
hit
on
neem
there.
first?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if you have nothing to lose, you could maybe try a little bit of both. You know what I mean? Neem part of one area, and that's going to be your control. It's as big as the carpet here. Neem that. You got another area this big, and you're just going to dump.
Does that work? I've never heard of the product. Does that work on like tree mites, spruce spider mites?
Yes.
What's the name of the product?
Triplex.
Triplex?
Now, you and I both know that spruce spider mites are a rebound effect they're a secondary pest rebound from neonicotinoid use.
Yes.
Okay. So as long as you know that, it would be those
Rebound of what?
neonics.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Which, you know what? You saved a whole bunch of trees, and I honor neonics for that. And as long as you have high organic matter, you got no problem with neonics. When you start using neonics in really low organic matter soil, like out in Kansas, I'll take Merritt just as an example because of the chemical structure of it. Yeah, imidacloprid or clethandrine like he's talking about, it's a ring structure. When it breaks down, it breaks into two different olefin compounds. One is a 2,5-hydroxyolefin compound, and I can't remember what the other one is. Those compounds are persistent, and they're 10 times more toxic than the parent compound. So when you put these things out and they biodegrade, they become 10 times more toxic than the original parent compound. And what we got these guys to do, I got Joe Elkington and these guys in Connecticut and Massachusetts, go test the hemlock wood for olefins. The last thing that I saw was 7 years out, and the olefin concentration was still in these trees.
I'm not real familiar with that area, but is that still active? The olefins, are they active against the adelgid as well? Is that why basically we get 7 to 8 year residuals?
Right.
Okay, that's fine.
You have one atom of an olefin in these trees, and it will kill you. You know what I mean? They are so susceptible to it. The minute you start to see adelgids in trees, there's no nicotinoids in those trees. And that's what, when I went to grandfather, they were spending more than $100,000 a year. They had a crew of 5 people, and they were injecting or soil. If they got within 50 feet of a creek, they had to do Moget with Stemix. If they were further out, they could use the the Keyorks. And so they started. They first found adelgid in 2002, and we had the big meeting in August 22nd of 2002 at the Broyhill where Pete Gurdon and all the grandfather people were there. They quit treating in 2006, but they had spent, it was either 2006 or, let me think, maybe, no, it was 2007 that they quit. So they had spent some 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, 150,000 a year times 5. They spent $750,000. I came to them and said, for $25,000, you hire me for a year, and I'll do this. So we were able to get them. Here's the other trick that they did. They didn't treat any of their trees that were 4 inches in diameter or under. They thought all those trees were going to die. None of those trees died. They all got adelgid, but the beetles got in there. The beetles started in all of that undergrowth. Then as soon as these big trees, as soon as the imidacloprid was gone out of them, the beetles were up in there. It's been 11 years at Grandfather. You can go up there. You know,
the state park?
I'm talking about Grandfather Golf and Country Club on this side. But everything in that valley now, you know what I mean? Or you go over by Eseola where you got to do that zigzag around 105 where you come up and if you went left, you'd go to Grandfather, you go right, you go down a mile and make that other left. All those big hemlocks in there were never treated, and they've all survived because they were close enough to get beetles. And so that's the real game on that thing. Okay, so you got black flies, mosquitoes, you've got black flies and also biting midges. I put out BT israeliensis. I might
Fungus
have...
gnats.
Yeah, fungus gnats, right. Yeah. I may have one of the... I think I've got a jar of those things over there. We'll see. Squash vine borer, this is one that Patrick taught me, was weekly spraying around the base of these plants. If you do see that you've got squash vine borer, you can just crack the vine open, pull that thing out, put it back together and bury it in the...
If you really start early, I mean, if it's far along, that's kind of like, yeah, you can get somebody that's got really bad cancer and take a whole lot of their body out, and they will kind of live, but it won't be a very good life, you know. But if you get it, if you got good eyes and you just see a little bit of frass boy, I've done it. I've gone there with a knife, my little Johnny's serrated knife, and popped those guys out when they were tiny, and then got on my spraying, and they were perfectly fine. You know?
Have you ever done injection?
Yeah, it was a zoo. Did you? Have you?
I did it too.
Yeah. Try to inject into a plant that's not designed. I mean, we have veins. They don't have veins.
They're hollow, so what you'd have to do is you go like a 1/4 inch in, and the crazy thing is I didn't have a 10 cc syringe, you know, so I'm going to the drugstore and I'm like, I need a 10 cc syringe, you know, guys looking at me like, okay, mister, what is wrong with you?
Well, then for me, the needle plugged. And so I'm trying to pop the needle, and I push really hard, and the needle goes flying somewhere, you know. So now there's a needle laying around at Highland Lake. So just like BT and soap twice a week.
Just around the base.
And you're also hitting the nymphs of the squash bug. It's not going to have a big impact on the squash bug.
I just thought of one really good one for you. When I went to China, this is many years ago, this is actually in 1992 or 93, the biocontrol lab there had won the Chinese National Science Medal of Honor, and they made a shrine, you know what I mean? They had this big star with the golden thing, and it was a corner. They had taken SC nematodes, and were for peachtree borer, any of these LEP borers, they would just take a squeeze bottle, get the SC nematodes going in the squeeze bottle, and squeeze them into the frass holes of the peach tree borer in peaches or whatever trees they hit. They hit a whole bunch of other trees, and I can't remember this. So these guys, all they did, so they got like, you know, just a regular squeeze bottle with the little thing down, shook up the nematodes, scored them in all the holes, and then what we did, we laid out white sheets under these trees. It took about 2 or 3 days. All of a sudden, all these borers just came out of these trees, and they're all infected because they turned pink. And so another thing with some of these is when they're infected with nematodes, they glow. They glow red. So there's another use for your ultraviolet light for that. So you have that going on. So here was this thing that worked really good, and I think that we could probably modify this to be used in an arbor setting for the right kind of borers. Real cheap, works good. So they would squeeze these nematodes in there into those bore holes, and nematodes would become systemic in the plant's vascular system, and they're just cruising up and down, and man, they find those things, and bam, they would get.
So which do you think is better for emerald ash borer, the BT or the nematodes?
I have no idea. Probably imidacloprid.
Abamectin benzoate. It's the,
Abamectin, yeah.
yeah.
Abamectin, right.
It's basically, I think it's actually a biologic. It's a toxin,
Yeah.
but you,
It's like ivermectin.
yeah, you put a trunk injection, you basically put a hole, put a plug in with a septum. That's how we treat them. And there's this thing out of the North Central IPM, this committee, and all these really people, very smart people out of Ohio State, Michigan State, and all these consortium, basically, they came up with that.
And so it is a biological.
Yeah, I
It's
think.
biologically derived.
Yeah,
biologically derived.
It's a fungal.
Yeah.
It's not persistent and it's not secondary. It's not going to have secondary damage.
I mean, you put it right in, like right around the base of the tree, and it gets carried up through the vasculature.
And is
there's, like an economic threshold where a certain amount of the crown is gone, you just write it off, don't treat it. But it lasts for about 3 years.
That sounds pretty cost effective.
Where it's a little bit more expensive, but something with like a metacloprid, you have to do a soil drench. It only lasts a year. Then it gets into the groundwater issues and all that. So,
And what's the name of it again?
Abamectin benzoate. The commercial name is Triage.
Triage. Okay.
Put out by Arborjet.
Okay.
Arborjet.
Right.
Triage G4 is
Okay. Cool.
one formulation. That's what we use. It's basically like a little scuba tank, and it's got a needle that goes through that plug that you set in the tree, and it's put under, depending on conditions, anywhere between like 20 to 50 psi. But they've done studies that actually really good wound healing on these plugs and whatnot, and because you only have to do it about every 3 years.
Trees do pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But question: if you use the nematodes and all those infected borers came out, could you then let them mature and then use them other places?
Sure.
So basically, you could be raising nematodes while you control your emerald ash borer. So maybe you do both. You pick enough emerald ash trees. Maybe the ones that aren't worth saving, you use them for raising nematodes.
The way to do that is just raise wax moth larvae,
Right,
you know what I
that's-
mean,
yeah,
and
right.
do it brutally easy. But what would be nice and what you could do is take some of the, if theoretically this worked, you could take some of those other infected larvae and reintroduce them so that you keep your genetics up, you know what I mean? So you're bringing that wild type back.
Are those nematodes in any danger to like pine or anything?
No, they're not pine wilt, no.
Completely different.
They kill pine wilt nematodes. A lot of these entomophagus nematodes also work on plant parasitic nematodes. Corn root knot nematode and soybean cyst nematode, HB nematodes will kill them.
They will also probably kill some beneficial soil insects too, right?
Yeah.
But they won't kill worms, which is good news.
No, they won't kill worms. So the last two that we had on here, other than squash vine borer, was cross-striped cabbage worm, which has this Cotia oro bean, which could work if you get it out early, but if you've got a cabbage or a broccoli plant that's got a bunch of these cross stripes, you need to hit it with BT or some virus or something, because these things come in groups. You know what I mean? If there's one cross-striped cabbage worm, there's 20 of them, and they're just,
And it's a hard one because you'll see they're infected.
oh yeah,
But it doesn't matter.
they shot hole the plants all crazy.
Orange striped oakworm with spinosad.
Uh-huh.
That's what we use.
Oh yeah, okay.
I was trying to decide between BT or spinosad, and
See, I think you should mix them up.
we just use spinosad.
Yeah.
It's more expensive, but I think the BT degrades a little bit quicker, so there's a little bit longer residual.
Yeah, I just think you might end up selecting for more resistant to spinosad. If you throw in some BT once in a while, you get rid of any developing resistance,
And so, once again, back in the coal crops, we had Diamondback Moth, and we used to use this guy, and this guy worked great, Diadegma ancillaire. It's a really fast wasp, and Diamondback moths are really fast. They wiggle like a earthworm on meth. They're wiggling like that. Well, these wasps are faster than that worm. They come up to that worm, and that worm, if that worm knows that wasp is coming along, it'll silk down. It'll just jump off the plant and silk down. Well, guess what the wasp does? Wasp just grabs hold of the thing, goes right down to it, bam, stings it, and the thing's flopping around. It's great. I loved it. And the other thing that would happen is the Diadegma pupa is made out of the larval case of the of the diamondback moth. You know, so when you find it, you'll see this, you know, kind of like an outline of a diamondback moth, and then inside there is this little nice black and white cocoon, and you're like, it's diamondback. So the other one that Patrick really broke a lot of people's brain with is Mexican. I don't have a lot of other things up here that he and I have done now. I think about it. Mexican bean beetle. He did Pediobius fulvulatus, and that works really good. I use that also at Jake's farm because they had 2/3 of an acre of beans that was getting lit up by Mexican bean beetle. We put the bean beetle's parasite out, and the first thing they did was hit the larger larvae, and then they would shrink up, and then pretty soon, even those little tiny
little
larvae got...
And the youngest pupa.
Right.
Like the ones that are not quite all the way pupated, gets them too. And at first, when we bought these, we got told that it didn't work on squash beetle, but it sure as heck does.
Oh, yeah. It works on that.
You know, the only time that doesn't work, Dick, is if we've got a really cold summer. If it's a really cold summer, this is a warm wasp from India, and it is not going to be happy in a cold summer, and it just won't thrive. You know, but aside from that, it's magic. You just put it out, and you have control. And it's really satisfying. You walk around, you see just enough beetles most years to know that the wasp gets to keep going. One year, when it had been really cold, and the beetles were already kind of at low numbers, when we put it out, we actually totally crashed the population. And then later on, in September, bean beetles came in for somewhere else, and they hammered our cucumbers in September when they shouldn't have, because our Pediobius had just run out of steam. There was nothing to eat.
So I've got a website, and I built this website for you to teach. The Chinese name for these things are chinquiza, which means little tortoise. Because think of what ladybugs can do. They can retract their head into their body like a tortoise. So somehow, you know, when I'm looking, what's the common name of this? This is golden tortoise. You know, that's the general name of these things. And it's like, holy cow, they actually understood. So when you look back, you know, in the taxonomic stuff now, you know, they say that, you know, this is one of the key characters for ladybugs is they can hide their head, all right? So if you scroll down just a little bit more, this is a C7. The reason I did this is I have every different ladybug. I have the larva for, you know, so what I've tried to do is if you want to know, if you're looking at a larva and you know it's a ladybug larva and it's black with 2 yellow spots on it, that's a convergent lady beetle. You know what I mean? So here, yeah. So this is, for those of you that saw that larva in the greenhouse, this was that larva, and this one's getting ready to pupate, obviously, so I get 2 with 1, but you notice the color pattern on it. So if somebody calls me up and they say, hey, I got a ladybug, I'm like, which one?
Oh, there's different ones.
There's different ladybugs? Well, yeah, because depending on what you're going to do, I'm just going to go to beneficials again. So look across the top here. Here's what we were talking about today, and we can keep going on this. You've got ladybugs, you've got parasitic wasps, you've got your predatory and parasitic flies, predatory bugs, lacewings, predatory beetles, manids, spiders, dragonflies, okay? So if you click on this one, well, actually, let's do something else real quick. I want to do one other thing. And that is, let's scroll down further because I want to show you some of these other. So the other thing that I did is I did a line drawing to show you the C7, so you can count the 7 spots. The other thing is it has these key characters where if I see those little white things there, I know it's a C7 or I know it's that particular ladybug. Okay, and we can click on each one of these pictures. Don't really need, I just want to show you. So here's your Harmonia Ladybug, which could have as many as 20 spots. The other thing it has these little indentations that if you look in the reflection of the light on the back of the elytra of the beetle, there's going to be these 2 little dents. So it doesn't even matter, you know, sometimes these ladybugs can be black with red spots. I mean, they've got every color pattern. When I first saw these things in China, I thought every different color pattern was a different species of ladybug. And I'm going to these USDA guys and I'm like, you know, because, I mean, it was just amazing. And then finally they're like, oh no, that's the same ladybug. It's all these different color patterns, okay? So you have for the purpose of this class, you have two general round ladybugs, right? Which is Harmonia and C7. And then you've got your oval ladybugs. You've got two oval ladybugs, which is Hippodamia. So this is the one you buy through California ladybug. And then you've got this C-Mac one, and C-Mac is actually pink and black. So I have pictures of it in here. We don't need to go close, but the other thing that I have in there too, if you look down, I have all the things that we talked about, how to handle and release ladybugs. Because Patrick's the only guy in North Carolina that knows how to use ladybugs.
In a greenhouse.
That's
right,
people
in a
in North
greenhouse,
Carolina State University. Right? So, what a big mystery, right? What a big world. So,
I did kind of get in trouble with the staff at Highland Lake Inn because I kept them in the staff fridge, and they do have their own peculiar.
oh yeah, they smell like
I wasn't real popular with it.
carbon dioxide. You don't want to be doing that. Okay, so the other thing we want to do, then I'll show you. I just want to show you how my website's kind of set up, and this is another picture of Patrick's, because this is a team thing, okay? My company's name is Symbiont, because a symbiont is an organism that lives with other organisms and helps each other, right? And that's the kind of economic system, and that's the kind of approach that we want to have here. We want to be able to help each other to get further down the road. So there's a whole thing of Principles of Farmscaping, which is a handout that you guys were given. If you other people don't have them, we've got a few in here. You can click on that and it loads it up. And then the other thing, of course,
That picture there's not a bug in it. It's about setting the table. You know, it's about making sure that everybody gets a good meal, that they want to come to your place and they want to chow down. You know, and so you make it as appealing as possible. If it's at a restaurant, it's about the chefs decorating the plate. If it's out in the garden, it's you planting the farmscaping.
so the other thing about all this is that we've tried to do, especially for this farmscaping stuff, is we've tried to take all the plants that we know that are pretty good from our perspective and put them in here for you guys to mess with. And then you guys call us back and say, hey, this works for this thing but doesn't work for that thing. Well, then guess what? I put it on here now. Everybody knows again, right? Because this is just a big feedback thing. So if you look at all this, we've got all these different, you've got, the reason I show this one is that's at BB50 at Jake's farm. We don't need to go and then we've got mustards, and they'll have, syrphids and ladybugs on them. Same thing here. Buckwheat's another good one. You've got your radishes, red clover, all your different legumes, cowpeas, coriander, your grains. This is down at Jewel Morrow's 3 acres of broccoli that we had those Hippodamia ladybugs in because they got out into this. You've got buckwheat if you scroll down further. So these are all just plants that you guys can look at. My website's kind of homespun and blocky, but the thing about it is, and I'd be glad, we could link, you just link to me or however you guys want to do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
And the thing to know about buckwheat and cilantro is those are the two to get you started. Both of those, given the time of year, buckwheat will go a little bit longer, but cilantro, my joke about cilantro is they have the slower bolting ones, and they really are slower, at least by 45 minutes. And so that's a major advantage if you want to get flowers. And likewise buckwheat, they will flower regularly, and Richard has pointed out with buckwheat, you can come by and just mow those flowers off and keep the same buckwheat flowering all summer long. And you can also scatter these guys. They're wispy little plants. You can just go out there and throw a handful of cilantro seed out, a handful of buckwheat seed, wherever it lands. The ones you like, you leave. The ones you don't, anybody that can't control buckwheat, they're really not paying attention.
One of the tricks that Brinkley did with buckwheat that he showed us was if you leave just 2 nodes on buckwheat, you could weed eat it down. You would plant buckwheat, within 45 days it would have bloomed and gone back to seed. If you weed eat it and just leave 2 nodes, you can keep it blooming. You can have the same buckwheat patch bloom 3 or 4 times. You just have to keep going out and mowing it, and then it'll grow back up and mow it again. So it works pretty good.
The other thing to know about it is you can plant it out. I've done it. I'm sowing my winter cover crops, and it's the middle of September. Who would put buckwheat out then? I put it out. You know what? It's flowering by the middle of October. It's this tall and it's flowering, but it's food when there isn't a lot of food.
Right.
You know?
That's a good one. I didn't even think about
Yeah.
that. So the other thing you think about here, this is yarrow. So here's your Achilla, your good herb, stemming blood flow. And here's your CMAC ladybug, because it's in here, there's those phenyl aphids have gotten into this thing. So it's in there, and it's probably also eating a little bit of protein. So we have this whole website. I mean, we could have just started with this morning. You guys ask me questions, and we just go where it goes. And it doesn't even have to be my website. It's whatever, you know, we're always trying to educate each other about, hey, here's a new website, windy.com. Oh, I love windy.com. I want to go see how the wind's blowing around. You know what I mean? So here's your farmscaping, okay? You've got spring, summer, fall, winter. I don't know. It should, the tabs should come up. There's all those, okay, there they are. How did you do that? All right. So EPM is my total, that's Ecological Pest Management class. I've got 18 classes on here. If you really want to get tortured, this is what Chip, when I quit doing the Sustainable Development class at ASU because I needed to save hemlocks, to tell you the truth. So this has all your EPM concepts. It has all your scouting forms for broccoli, which you could use for a tree. All you got to do is change the nouns. I've got paper assignments, major insect orders, tools of pest management. This is all assigned reading that would drive you nuts and drive you crazy, but I make all these guys learn all those crazy formulas and everything, you know what I mean, so that you can make a decision. Because if you're sitting there and you've got an acre of broccoli and you're worth X amount an hour and you've got flea beetles, is it going to be worth enough for you to treat them? Well, you can sit there and calculate it out real quick. Okay, it's going to cost me $300 an acre. My BT doesn't cost anything, okay? So back in the day, this is an old bag, okay? This would be about 15 bucks to treat an acre. So the ingredient is nothing. So my threshold for treating is way low if I want it to be and if I need it to be. If I'm selling at the farmer's market, I don't need to be as fastidious as if I'm trying to sell 900 pounds every week to Earth Fair. Because those guys are, they're unmerciful. If you open up a box and there's a worm at the top of it, they're calling you up and they're going to have you come back and haul all that stuff off, and it's going to make you go broke. Okay? Now, what's the trick on this? You cannot let this stuff freeze. If you let this stuff freeze, you might as well just go get you some flour and go spray it out, because it's going to work just about as good. So that's one of the critical things about a lot of these products. The same thing with soap. If you mix soap up, you better use it right then, right? Or the other thing that I would do with Charles Church is Charles Church says soap doesn't work. And I said, what do you mean soap doesn't work? He said, well, I sprayed all these harlequin bugs and I put them in a jar over there. I said, well, you've given them all the humidity. Let me put a mesh top on there and I'll come back tomorrow. Come back tomorrow, they're all dead, right? Because what happens when you use soap, you burn the cuticle off. If it's dry and hot like this out there, that bug's dead today. If that bug can get in the greenhouse and go hide somewhere, it might survive enough to make it. I don't even know if they can regrow a cuticle. I don't even know that. But
Well, they shed them, so they probably can.
well, if they're growing, you know what I mean? But once you're an adult beetle, you've got your suit of armor and that's it. So I don't really know. So this is if you guys really, at some point in time, if we really wanted to do something advanced where we could come in here once a month or something and do one of these classes where you guys just eat this stuff up, you're coming back in the meantime, telling me what's going on, how's your stuff going, what's going on with peachtree borer, what's going on with your broccoli crop, or what's going on with onions, or any of these things. So there's a lot of this stuff here that we have purposely put together as learning tools for you guys. So the other one really quick, aside from farmscaping, is if you go to the pests, we've got all these vegetable pests. So you can click on this and you've got, okay, here's the thing, and Patrick has these, because last night before I go to bed, I'm a book geek and I'm just scanning all of his books. This is the 1952 Yearbook of Agriculture. It's on insects. The plates in this thing are incredible. So if you ever wanted, like I bought these books at yard sales where they're missing the cover I got them for 50 cents. You know what I mean?
Ed Updike gave them all to me.
Did he? Oh, that's great. So,
That's what community is about, you know?
so here's your squash vine borer one. Now, the thing that you don't want to do, but I put it in here as a historical reference, is over here your control is like, you know, DDT put out at 10-day intervals. You know, look at that part. Or see how far we've come, right? Because you think back to, you know, my parents, I had DDT. We had a big glass brown jug of DDT. We had a big glass jug of lindane. We had chlordane. If I think back now, I mean, that stuff scares me to death. And I used to just slog it around like crazy.
Those things are persistent.
Oh, here's one I want. This is the one I want to show you. All right. On the right, this is Johnny's salad mix at Jake's farm being attacked by flea beetles, okay? We put nematodes in. 3 weeks later, all of his leaves look like this one over here, and they were sellable. And that's him holding it, going, I'm selling my salad. I thought that salad mix was gone, right? And I'm like, no, we rescue, you know, it's very rare that you can do a biological rescue, but this was a great, you know, this was an actual rescue treatment that happened. So those types of things.
When nematodes work, boy, I mean, you go out there, Chinese cabbage, arugula, everything, no holes. Nothing there, you know. Nematodes are down. It's really satisfying.
So you can see, okay, so the other one here, like cross-stripe, look at the egg mass of a cross-stripe cabbage worm, right?
Those aren't good odds.
No, that's not good odds. So when all those things hatch out, you're going to get tons of these little larvae everywhere.
Unless you have tons of ladybugs that come eat those things. You know?
You're going to have ladybugs. You have to have those coatsy wasps that attack these.
If you have enough depth of diversity, you might not need to spray. Right. But you got to know when to let it go and just use the BT. It's not that big a deal.
The thing that I want to show you guys, these are just actual pictures that I've taken when I'm scouting. So a lot of this stuff is based, you know, this is not classroom reality insect photo salon nose upturned, right? This is me out flipping over a leaf. That was a diamondback moth, and there's that pupa inside. That diamondback moth started to make its pupal case, and then the larva came out. So this is the kind of stuff, it's eminently practical, that I would love to do with you guys some other time, maybe later in this season, is we do one of these ones again where we go out into the field out here and scout, because we can find tons of stuff. And in fact, this place is easy because these guys got it going, you know what I mean? This is a...
Actually, you know what, Richard? We've scheduled a reoccurrence of the long dead CFSA Western North Carolina gathering.
Oh, yeah.
For the Saturday closest to solstice. People have been asking for that, and maybe you should come down for that. Yeah. And just have that be the, you know, we always have some kind of demo in those things. We do, somebody would show something, you can just go out there. We'll have loads and loads of things happening around solstice.
So the other thing too, depending on, you know, one of the one thing that I want you guys to get right away is you got to know the proper ID of your pest. If you don't get that pest identified, I mean, look what happened with hemlock woolly adelgid. We didn't identify that pest right? If we would have known from the time 20 years prior to 2006, in 1986, that pest is just native to the Pacific Northwest. We could have bought those predators in and you wouldn't have had this problem that we've had. What happens with us, because we're humans, we do this. We have a subsistence phase, we have an exploitation phase, we have a crisis phase, and then we have a disaster phase, and then finally, we do something about it. And I hate that, because when I was young, and I used to hear my dad say stuff like that, and it made me so mad, because I knew he was right, but at the same time, I wanted to bust out all that stuff, you know what I mean? But human nature is going to be human nature. The one thing I want to tell you guys about this should be the thing that government does first. This is the thing that government does last, if they do it at all, and I can show you example after example. The Midwest is being eaten alive by Japanese beetle right now. Are they doing the biocontrol program? No. Oregon's hired me to do
You
it.
can't solve it as an individual. It costs too much money. It's a community solution. It takes community investment.
Can't put that in a bottle and squirt it on it.
No, and if you have been raised in a capitalist pig dog system where you feel like you're not doing something unless you want to screw somebody, right? You know what I mean? It's not an equal exchange as I've got to just put it to this guy and pull it out, right? Which has happened to me, you know what I mean? You get around some of these guys and it's like, hey, don't go work with this guy with this last name, blah, 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 because he's going to, and sure enough, you know, that's what happens. So that's another big part of ag, right, is who can you work with, who's reliable. When I'm harvesting broccoli, if I call my buddy up and say, hey, will you help me harvest? We can go 3 times faster. And he goes, no. And I'm like, well, I would have harvested your broccoli for you. You could have, you know what I mean? We could have gotten done in half the time, but you don't have people that are team players and can't get outside of their own ego to see somebody else might be having a problem. So you've got a lot of, you know, you've got a lot of human nature work to do. So once again, you can go down through my website. Another really neat little trick. Let's talk about whiteflies just for a second, since we talked about them before. Here's your greenhouse whitefly. Wings are held roof-like over the body. You've got your other ones. You've got silverleaf, ash whitefly, sweet potato whitefly. The one thing that's really neat about all of them is the nymphs of them are sessile. So they just sit. They can't move. So when you turn these leaves over, if they're normal pupa, they have a T-shaped exit hole for the whitefly to come out. If they've been parasitized, it looks like the alien has popped out. So right away, if I start seeing these, I know I'm going to start to back off because I've got these guys going, and pretty soon you flip these things over and 100%, you know what I mean, they can wipe. The trick with these guys is the temperature, all right? Look at this. This is a whole thing with everything. You guys have to, there's a trick with everything, okay? So here's this trick. Incarcia can out-reproduce whiteflies by 2 times if the temperature in the greenhouse is 75 degrees or above. So all you got to do there is manage your temperature and you can wipe these guys out. If it's below that, the whiteflies can keep reproducing because they reproduce at a lower temperature. That's their advantage. So anyway, and you can click on these, and they're pretty good pictures. I'm gonna work on the website and make it a little bit better, but you know, so look at some of the things. Here's what we found. Here's an aphid mummy with an exit hole. You've got green peach aphid on broccoli, and then this could get mummified. And we saw C7 ladybugs next door. So you've got a lot, you know, you've got a lot of stuff that you can use. Once again, with a lot of these aphids, this is where we would use goldenrod or some other thing that we would call a banker plant to grow our aphid predators on something else that's not going to get on our crop, and then they jump right on it.
Something I meant to mention in there, did everybody see that nice, gorgeous burdock there right by the door?
Yep.
When that goes to seed, it reliably is covered up. And I'm not sure if it's the allium aphid or what, but it's a mass of black aphids. You know, and they don't tend to get on just anything. They get on certain things, but they don't tend to get on our crops, but they're feeding all those beneficials. And so, you know, every time we have those kind of aphid outbreaks, I'm just happy as can be. You know.
And see, that's totally counterintuitive, because what we used to say is we didn't want to see any pests. I mean, nozzlehead quote of the year used to be, we used to have this one up where this guy that was an insect scout said, if an insect comes into my field, bless you, I want to make sure he's got something hot to sit down on. And I'm like, what kind of field? You know what I mean? These guys are spraying parathion weekly, you know what I mean? They're getting rid of unwanted brain cells.
I would see major infestations of potato beetles and have to resist the urge to pop them because they're just like a zit. You really want to hit them, but I would just resist, and then I would see things like bombardier beetles getting up off the soil, up on the plant, which is not what they're supposed to do, and be tearing up those larvae because they were readily available food. You put enough food out there and wait, and once again, you know, you can take some defoliation on your potato leaves for the natural systems to kick in. And when they kick in, they're going to kick in with all kinds of predators, lots of which are generalists, and they're going to be there after the potatoes are done to move on to the next thing. So it's just, if you can just hold your fire,
right,
you know, give them a chance.
So once again, with some of these bugs, there are these flies, and they're really, you can notice these flies because they have brilliant red fuzzy legs. They're really crazy. This is Trichopoda pinnipes. And it will attack the stink bug and lay an egg on it, and then the larvae bore in and they...
And you know where I sent you a picture and where you identified it? Got milkweed? You got milkweed, you're going to have milkweed seed bug.
Oh, yeah.
Is milkweed seed bug a problem for you? No. Is it a problem for the milkweed? No. But that fly is a problem for the milkweed seed bug, and then of course it's around to attack other bugs, and you get control of other bugs. So it works that way, and it's pretty satisfying. What I like to tell people too is if you see a fly, a good sized, kind of hairy looking housefly out there where you don't expect to see it, not around the garbage, not around your plate, but just out there, maybe like trying to sneak up on a bug or something, odds are real good it's attacking that fly. It is not a housefly, and it is looking to lay its eggs in whatever it's sneaking up on. You know, and it's kind of fun just to take that picture, talk to Richard, and find out, yep, that's what it is. On my computer, I got a picture of was it the gold-necked or gold-necked, right? Gold-necked caterpillars. Mm-hmm. And there's this tachnid fly, and it's just trying to sneak up. And that gold-necked there's like a bunch of gold-necked caterpillars, and they got their heads and their butts out trying to keep that fly away. And that fly is just trying to get in there to lay its eggs. You know, and so who's worried about gold-necked caterpillars? None of us, because that fly is busy using them for a nursery.
So if you go down through each one of these tabs that we have at the top here, I've got beneficials, and then there's a tab under that of 10. And then underneath that would be like parasitic wasps. And then once again, you know, this is the one that attacks the imported cabbage worm. And, you know, here are your cocoons. You can go down, you can use this website as a really nice learning tool where I've got most of your basic, your basic vegetable pests and stuff in here. Here's another one that I really like. This is one of those hypositor wasps, and the reason I like that is you can see the remnant of the caterpillar that it attacked. So when I find these, so this is on broccoli. So this could have been, one of the wasps. That's a looper larva. So it's been killed by a hypositor wasp. Okay. So, you've got parasitic wasps. I mean, if you just go across the top here, I've got just about 10 things under each one of these. You got predatory and parasitic flies. You got predatory bugs. You got brown and green lacewings. Your predatory beetles would be your crabbed beetles and some of your other predatory beetles like that, praying mantids, spiders. And once again, I threw dragonflies in here just because it's that 100 little hammer effect, Having those dragonflies in there gives us something that is attacking things in the air. And they might be more of a generalist, but I've seen them taking out imported cabbage worm butterflies just one after another, so it's like, hey.
It's just keeping the pressure up on all fronts.
It's low-level, continuous stress brings us what we want.